Who's your commander?
Good luck.
Equip.
Move to combat.
Resolves.
Now, before you attack
Does
me,
anyone have an answer?
well played.
Good game.
Hello everyone, DJ here with the Jumbo Commander YouTube channel, and I want to talk to you about my top 8 commander cards from Theros Beyond Death. The first thing I want to jump straight into is an honorable mention, and that's because this card is not in normal booster packs. You have to go out and find a theme booster and get the red one, and then be lucky enough to open up this rare that's only found in those crazy boosters. I know that's a lot of hoops to jump through for you to get your very own copy of Death Bellow Warcry. Death Bellow Warcry is 5 red for a sorcery. That's 8 CMC. It reads, search your library for up to 4 Minotaur creature cards with different names, put them onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So you have to be asking yourself, how many really good Minotaurs are there? Is this going to be worth 8 mana? And honestly, I think that it is. I think this is close to game winning in our format. So the first thing I would get are the 2 Nehebs. They are amazing. Neheb Dreadhorde General can get you some card advantage, get you some mana, and Neheb the Eternal can get you a ton of mana, like a lot of mana. So if you have something to use mana for in your second main phase, Neheb the Eternal is going to be really great. Then to supplement that, I think immediately you need Karagma Warcaller, because that's the Minotaur that gives you haste and all other Minotaurs haste, and attacking Minotaurs get +2/+0. So swinging in with your team's going to deal a ton of damage. Then I think it's a toss-up between Glinthorn Buccaneer, dealing damage to a bunch of your opponents if you're discarding your whole hand to Neheb Dreadhorde Champion, or Fanatic of Mogus, maybe dealing a bunch of damage to all of your opponents. But 4 of these Minotaurs could be a huge boost to your board and then let you swing in for tons of damage, and especially with the Nehebs, give you card advantage, give you mana, really propel you forward in this game. And that's a pretty sweet thing to do for 8 mana. All right, let's get into the real top 10 list with my number 8 pick for the best commander card in Theros Beyond Death. It is one of the gods. It's Vasa Deep Dwelling. 3 and a blue for a legendary enchantment creature god. It's a 6/5 indestructible, but it's not a creature unless your devotion is 5. At the beginning of your end step, exile up to 1 other target creature you control, then return that card to the battlefield under your control. It also has an activated ability, 3 and a blue, tap another target creature. So the blink effect on Vasa is like a Conjurer's Closet, and that is a commander staple. So this comes in a little bit more limited because it has to be in blue, but also 4 CMC instead of 5, indestructible instead of an artifact that gets blown up all the time. And also that added activated ability means that Vasa is going to be really solid in a lot of decks, a lot of blink decks, a lot of stealing decks. I love that this lets you steal just like the Conjurer's Closet does, because you exile a creature you control and it comes back onto the battlefield under your control, not its owner's control. So sometimes steal effects that are even temporary can get you their creature permanently. I also like this target ability, tap another target creature. If you have cards like Verity Circle or other things that require tapping, maybe you turn all their creatures into illusions perhaps, then you might be able to get some corner case use out of this activated ability. But Vasa is awesome, and who knows, maybe you'll just attack with a 6/5 too. Seems good. Number 7 on my list is Dryad of the Elysian Grove. It's 2 and a green for a 2/4 enchantment creature nymph. That enchantment creature type could be relevant for your deck, but what's good in every commander deck are making your land drops. You may play an additional land on each of your turns. That's great because lands on the battlefield are the best type of ramp. Okay, lands you control are also every basic land type in addition to their other types. So the easiest comparison has to be Wayward Swordtooth, which has also kept its high price tag even with rotation. So this could be a card that has a lot of staying power in our format. I do feel that 3 CMC play an extra land every turn effects are a little bit weaker than the other variants. The ones that are at 1 CMC, like Exploration and Burgeoning, Oracle of Moldiah and Courser help you play off the top. So those give you card advantage rather than a mana advantage. So these would be best paired with a deck that gives you a lot of card advantage so you can make sure to utilize all of those land drops. So blue-green decks would do really nicely with this. But this Dryad is going to slot into a lot of different multicolored decks because it lets your lands tap for whatever you want. It's a prismatic omen, and that's actually a pretty pricey card in general. So besides fixing your mana, does this have any corner case advantages? Well, you could build your deck around it. You could go for Valakut of the Molten Pinnacle and have every land be a mountain. Similarly, you can have every land be a swamp for something like Dread Presence. You can make sure that you could have all of your lands represented so you can win with a coalition victory. That's banned in our format because it's not fun. Moving on to number 6, let's take a look at something I bet you thought would be higher on my list. It's Nyxbloom Ancient. Everyone freaked out when this card came onto the scene, and they should because it's a little bit silly. Nyxbloom Ancient is 4 green for an enchantment creature elemental. It's a 5/5 with trample. Had to have trample. And if you tap a permanent for mana, it produces 3 times as much of that mana instead. 3 times. Now, this is just a silly amount of mana. This has me thinking about Mana Reflection, which is a very solid commander card. Again, pretty expensive, but Mana Reflection only doubles. This triples for just a single extra green mana. Oh, and also throw in a 5/5 trample while you're at it. Okay. One thing that's important to note is that this is not infinite mana. It's just a lot of mana. And there's a big distinction for ways you can win the game with infinite mana versus a lot of mana. This also doesn't really immediately give you a lot of mana if you're playing it in the most fair and traditional ways. A lot of times you have to land this creature and then the next turn you just get, well, a lot of mana. Granted, we can use a lot of mana in our format. It's kind of built around mana, but I don't think that this is going to be this crazy broken card that everyone is freaking out about. I think that it can do some silly things, but for the most part, it's going to have a big target on its back. And being an enchantment creature might just mean it has more ways for you to kill it when it hits the battlefield. If you do happen to land a Nyxbloom Ancient and keep it around, things like Signets are good. Put a single mana into a Signet and then it produces 6. Gosh, the numbers on this just make me cringe inside. They're so amazing. You tap a Golgari Rot Farm and it produces 6 mana. Don't even get me started about Cabal Coffers. Jeez, this card is just silly, and it's going to be a lightning magnet. What is it called? A lightning rod for removal in our format. Let's look at number 5 on my list. It's Shadow Spear. It's an equipment for just a single mana. Legendary artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has trample and lifelink. You can also pay 1. Permanents your opponents control lose hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. And its equip cost is pretty inexpensive for only 2 mana. So for 3 mana, +1/+1, lifelink, and trample. That's actually pretty good. Those keywords are very relevant. The closest thing I can compare it to is probably Luxodon Warhammer, which pumps the power a little bit more, but you're going to be equipping this to big powered creatures anyways. So Luxodon Warhammer is like so clunky to play and equip 3 and 3. It's just really unwieldy. I mean, it's a big old Warhammer carried by an elephant. So, you know, it makes sense that it would be a little bit unwieldy, but Shadow Spear is like stabby, really efficient. And by the way, that activated ability is just an added bonus. I mean, if this is in your meta, you might be running cards like Arcane Lighthouse, but this is just another free roll effect to interrupt your opponents that are playing things that are a little bit unfair. Those super hexproof strategies, making everything indestructible. Maybe they're trying to get around board wipes or your interaction, but suddenly you can just blanket with incidental value on your equipment. Oh, so good. So good. All right, before I get into the top 4, I want to thank my sponsor, Cool Stuff Inc. They have tons of cool stuff, and if you want some of these cards, go ahead and check them out. And if you want to save on some of these singles, make sure to type in Jumbo5 for 5% off your order. I also want to thank all of my patrons that support me all the time. Thank you so much, patrons. You are a huge help to this channel. All right, now let's explore the top 4 of my list, and let's start off with Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath. This card is silly. 1 green-blue, that's 3 mana for a 6/6 legendary creature Elder Giant. When it enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless it escaped. So if you're playing this for 3 CMC, you're gonna have to sacrifice it. But don't worry, it's got an ETB. Whenever Uro enters the battlefield or attacks, you gain 3 life, draw a card, then you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. So just at face value, this is a slightly expensive explorer that might synergize with creatures or sacrifice or creature death or the graveyard or anything like that. So, and 3 life. So that's automatically pretty solid. But wait, there's that escape. You can play it from your graveyard for its escape cost of green, blue, exile 5 other cards from your graveyard. And then suddenly you have a 6/6 that will draw you a card, gain you 3 life, give you another land drop, not only when it comes into play, but every time it attacks. This is just value. Like, card draw and mana ramp is what makes Commander work. And this just feeds into that strategy. Listen, drawing cards and land drops are a staple of this format, and if you can just keep doing it over and over again, escaping, attacking with this thing, drawing more cards, ramping even more, then your deck's just gonna work really well. So Uro is a solid inclusion from your command zone or just in the 99. All right, number 3 is Nightmare Shepard. 2 black for a 4/4 enchantment creature demon. Nightmare Shepard has flying, and whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you may exile it. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's 1/1, and it's a nightmare in addition to its other types. So Nightmare Shepard recycles your creatures that died and brings them back. Yeah, they're weak, but you get to reuse and rebuy their enter the battlefield effects and maybe have them stick around a little bit longer. It gives you some board wipe protection. One thing that's a little bit interesting is that it will exile the creature. So a lot of black strategies that include reanimation might not work so well. But if you have a black strategy that deals with sacrifice, maybe an aristocrat strategy, maybe a Corvold deck or a Mazarek deck, then you can get double triggers out of your creatures. I mean, the values is just there. This kind of feels like a Panharmonicon, and a Panharmonicon is a staple of our format. And so it's really nice to see it making waves in mono black. Number 2 on our list is pretty spectacular. It's Underworld Breach. 1 and a red for an enchantment. An enchantment? That's a little bit funny. Each non-land card in your graveyard has escape. The escape cost is equal to the card's mana cost plus exile 3 other cards from your graveyard. At the beginning of your end step, sacrifice Underworld Breach. Okay. So giving everything escape means that you can rebuy a bunch of cards from your graveyard. You can't just cast everything because there is that clause of, well, you also got to exile a couple cards. So your graveyard has to be pretty stacked. But this effect is very good. Yawgmoth's Will gives you free reign over your graveyard, except whenever anything goes back to your graveyard that turn, it gets exiled instead. So Underworld Breach actually gives you the advantage of being able to play that spell over and over again as long as you have those 3 cards to exile. Also, when you're planning on playing a bunch of cards in a single turn, like in a Yawgmoth's Will's turn, then mana becomes really critical. An Underworld Breach only costs 1 in a red. That gives us a little bit of that mana advantage that we might need to combo out or get that extra value. It's pretty epic. I also love that it isn't just limited to instants and sorceries like Past in Flames. Instead, you can hit all sorts of cards in your graveyard. Yeah, Underworld Breach is going to be really, really good. I mean, if it does a pretty okay impression of Yawgmoth's Will, and that's a $70 card in a color that already interacts pretty strongly with the graveyard, yeah, Underworld Breach is great. I would play it in my Zada deck where I'm cycling through a bunch of stuff and definitely want to rebuy critical combo pieces in my graveyard. Or in a Wart the Raid Mother deck when I want to be casting instants and sorceries sort of over and over again and convoking everything. But really what I want to do is play it in Nekusar because we're going to be dumping tons of wheels into the graveyard and it's going to be pretty nice to be able to play Underworld Breach and then suddenly exile a few of that chaff I discarded to wheel again and then exile some more and wheel again and exile some more and wheel again. You can see how this could play into not just a few decks, but a lot of decks. Man, this could be a solid regrowth in red. I mean, this is really, really good. The power level of Underworld Breach might have you wondering, what on earth can be number 1 on my list? And honestly, number 1 deserves its spot. It's Vass's Oracle. Vass's Oracle is blue for a 1/3 creature merfolk wizard. When Vass's Oracle enters the battlefield, look at the top X cards of your library where X is your devotion to blue. Put up to 1 of them on top of your library and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Now here's the important part. If X is greater than or equal to the number of cards in your library, you win the game. So, Vass's Oracle is incredibly strong, and it actually is going to be replacing Laboratory Maniac in many of these I win the game combo decks. Laboratory Maniac is used in a lot of competitive decks to just win the game. Oftentimes you draw your entire library, you find your Laboratory Maniac, you play it, and then you go to draw 1 extra card and win the game. So Thassa's Oracle can also be redundancy for those styles of deck, but also Thassa's Oracle could be a little bit more resilient because Thassa's Oracle's enter the battlefield effect will go on the stack and have to resolve whether she eats a removal spell or not. Sometimes Laboratory Maniac could be interrupted by interaction from your opponents. Usually a Laboratory Maniac win is pretty certain, but sometimes you might be looking at those corner cases where Thassa's Oracle could be better. And in one situation, you could theoretically win with Thassa's Oracle with a card like Demonic Consultation. Demonic Consultation has you exiling the top 6 cards of your library, then you name a card. You start flipping over cards and exiling them until you get to that named card, and then bam, you get that card. Now, what happens if you name a card that is not in your library? Well, you end up exiling your entire library. Now, that's a pretty bad effect for 1 black mana, exiling your entire library. But when you have access to Thassa's Oracle that can just win the game from that point, yeah, we've suddenly made that draw your whole deck combo a lot more efficient. We've essentially distilled it down to a single card. And this single card only costing 1 black mana is pretty good. In fact, people have picked up on the interaction between Thassa's Oracle and Demonic Consultation. They've combined it in existing shells with Flash and Protean Hulk, and so they've built essentially this new competitive meta that's well, it's pretty predatory, it's pretty powerful, and it's kind of the flavor of the month right now. So is Thassa's Oracle number 1 just because it's great in competitive decks? Partially, yeah, it's so good, but also this could go in a lot of different decks, essentially giving you some card advantage. I mean, this draw ability is surprisingly good, and then incidentally being able to win the game out of nowhere, I think that this can belong in a lot of different metas, so take a close look to find out if Vass Oracle is right for you. And that has been my top 8 list from Theros Beyond Death. Please let me know in the comments how I messed up this list. Are there cards that I didn't include that clearly have earned a spot on this list right here? And most importantly, I want to thank Cool Stuff Inc., my patrons, and you for watching this video, for liking, for subscribing, for all of those great things. Thank you, and I hope you guys have a great day.